My name is Julie Pearson, Little Thunder. Today is Thursday, April 30th, 2015, and I'm interviewing Mary Smith as part of the Oklahoma Native Artist Project, sponsored by the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program at Oklahoma State University. We're at Mary's home in Bixby. Mary, you make a number of cultural items, but you're perhaps best known for your baskets and beautiful mats, which have won you numerous awards over the years. You keep pretty busy teaching basket making workshops for Creek Nation in the various communities. Before I start the interview, we need to get one story out of the way, which is the story behind your home here in Bixby.
Okay. We purchased this house in 1974. It's 103 years old. It has a history that Pretty Boy Floyd, the notorious outlaw, his wife, Ruby Hargraves, was raised in this house.
That is really neat, and it's gorgeous, just beautifully furnished with antique furnishings. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Broken Arrow. I'm a twin. I have a twin brother. And I grew up and went to school here in Bixby.
What did your folks do for a living?
My father was a truck driver in his younger years, and then after he got older, then he had his own trucking company.
Is the creek on your dad's side or mom's or both?
It's on my father's side.
What was your relationship with your grandparents on either side of the family?
We were very close, very close. My dad's mother, and her name was Noma Williams Edwards, she had always talked about us being Creek, but as you can tell, I'm pretty fair, and so we just kind of fluffed it off for years. And but after I really started researching it, I took it all the way back to the early 1800s, back to Tukabachi, the head tribal town in the Creek Nation. My fifth great-grandfather was Ifa Hajo, which translated into Mad Dog. He was the principal chief and the head speaker from 1792 to 1803. At that time, he had a son. His son's name was Far Off Warrior. He and Far Off Warrior were out on a hunting expedition, but really it was said to be a war party with the Cherokees. On the way back, they went by Fort Rogers, and they were kind of worked up. And my fourth great-grandmother is Hannah Hale, and she was a little white girl playing out at the fort, and they captured her. And they took her back to Tukabachi. And at age 15, she married Far Off, and that's the line that I come from.
And also, I understand, although you're in Rolled Creek, you could have, I don't know if you actually have some Cherokee heritage too.
Yes, it was always told us that we could have either been Cherokee or Creek, but since my ancestors moved here to the Creek Nation, and they said, well, let's just be Creek then.
Were you around the language very much growing up?
No, not really. Not really. I did learn a little bit of the language by working with the Creek Nation for the immersion camps for the children, and I did that for several years.
Did you have any family or extended family who were artistically inclined?
My grandmother was very artistic. She made her living as a seamstress. That's the only job she had, and she would sew for doctors' wives. She made her own patterns, and I wish I had paid more attention to her when I was younger.
Well, I think you got some of that handiwork talent. And was this your paternal or maternal grandmother?
Paternal.
What are your earliest memories of seeing Native art?
It had to have been when I was young. I've just always been drawn to it. But what really, when I really became interested in art was after I got older, though. And we were making trips back and forth to Colorado during the summer on vacation. And I fell in love with the pottery, but it was the little storytellers, the little figures, and just little figurative pottery. And so I came home one trip from there, because at that time I didn't have any money. It's like, oh, I can't afford these. And so I came home and I just sat and I made about 10 or 15 pieces. And I thought they were cute, but I wanted somebody else's opinion. So I took them to the Five Tribes Museum and asked them, it's like, well, what do you think? And they said, do you want to sell them? And I'm like, do you want to buy them? And so that's really how I got started in pottery. And I kept doing the little storytellers and the little figurines until I'd done about 500, and I was trying to do every one of them different. Then I ran out of ideas.
Well, I had no idea you started in pottery. Now, this was kind of before the big Southeastern pottery revival, right? And
This was in the early 90s.
Oh, this was in the early 90s, okay. So Anna Mitchell and Jane Ostie and some of those people are already working. That's really neat. Did you take any classes from anybody, or you just
when I very first started out, I spent maybe 3 or 4 days with Patricia Gillum Stewart out of Fort Gibson, and she basically showed me just the basics, and then she said, go home and just work on it.
That's neat. So what was your exposure to art in elementary school?
Really, I don't think we had that much exposure at that time. Of course, that was in the 50s, and we just didn't really have that much, art classes or much to do with art.
Do you have any memories of making art at home? Your earliest memory of maybe making something?
No, not really. Not really. It wasn't until I got probably, I would say, in my 40s.
Wow. How about art experiences in high school? Any?
No, I just worked all through high school.
Bless your heart, going to school and working. What did you do?
I worked at that time there was a little drive-in restaurant, and I started working there until I was 15 to 18, waiting tables, being a car hop. Then they had car hops.
So what did you do after high school?
After high school, then I started to work, and I worked for an insurance company. I was an administrative assistant for probably 20 years.
And you weren't doing any art on the side?
Not any art on the side or anything. Mm-mm.
It was those Southwest pots that got you interested. When did you first get involved with basket making? What was the progression from pottery to what you do now?
I was doing a lot of work at that time with the Council House Museum, and we really only had, at that time, one basket maker, and that was Hepsy Gilroy. She was elderly at that time, so Ted Isham at that time was spending, I don't know that he was the director, but he was maybe the director of the museum. So he said, we only have that one basket weaver. He said, we need a basket weaver and you're it. He said, I want you to go and I want you to learn everything you can. He said, because we need a basket teacher. And so I did go and visit with Hepsy. We had the intention of weaving, but really her health was so poor that we just sat and we just talked. And I enjoyed it so much, and so I just started kind of learning on my own. I did take a class or two with Shauna Kane and Peggy Brennan. And so I did take a few classes with them, but then after that, it was just like, it just got in my blood, and it just seemed like, I've always been one that loved numbers. And it's just, seems like the numbers in the basketry just go with my brain.
They do. There's that mathematical component, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
Patterns. Yeah, there weren't a lot of Creek basket makers, but there were plenty of Cherokee basket makers.
Plenty of Cherokee basket weavers. Mm-hmm.
Did you also learn something about gathering natural materials at that point?
Yes, I had. By that point, I was already hooked on weaving, but I wanted to be able to make the river cane baskets and to do our natural rimming methods. Every tribe had really their own rimming method, and that's a lot of times, that's how you could tell what tribe had made that basket. The Creeks had what we called a double false frayed rim. It hadn't been done 100 to 150 years. Joyce Baer, she had worked with the Creek Nation Cultural Department for several years, brought me a basket that was handed down in her family. And I couldn't take it apart, so I just looked at it. And so that was my goal, was to figure that out. Well, it took me 3 weeks. I could get the first round of it, but the second round was driving me crazy. I went in one Friday morning and I said to Ted, I said, today is going to be the day, because I was just so tired of trying to figure it out. And in about an hour and a half, I took it to him and I said, I think this is it. And he looked at it and he said, that's it.
And Hepsi wasn't doing that?
No, no. Ted had told me it hadn't been done for 100 to 150 years.
That is amazing.
So naturally, Ted filmed me.
What was one of your important early shows then outside of the Council House Museum?
Of my earlier shows, probably would have been Cherokee, North Carolina.
How did you end up going there?
The first trip was with the Creek Nation, just took a group of us out. And so we took our artwork out and just demonstrated at the festival.
And were you demonstrating basketry at that point?
At that time, I think I was demonstrating weaving, but not, it was the heddle loom and possibly basketry. But I want to think it was just weaving with textiles.
What were your impressions of North Carolina?
I love North Carolina, and they have some absolute wonderful, wonderful basket weavers there. Ramona Lossie, her sister Louise, I mean, they are excellent basket weavers.
So you made a few friends there.
Yes.
How did you know how to price your work starting out?
Well, when I first started out, it was just like very reasonably low. And then it was like, then the more ribbons and the more acknowledgement I was getting, then I increased my prices.
And reasonably low would be what for a smaller basket?
For just a small basket, probably $10.
When you started out, were you incorporating any natural dyes with your baskets, or did that come later?
It came later. It came later, and as far as the natural dyes, I use black walnut and bloodroot when it is available and can be found.
Mm-hmm. What are and you never make Cherokee baskets then? You exclusively do the...
I make Cherokee baskets, but I only make Cherokee baskets whenever I'm teaching to children, because I think they are an easy basket, and they are an easy basket for a child to make.
Okay. How have your baskets changed over the years? You make a number of different kinds, and maybe...
Well, I try mostly to stick with Creek basketry, and then I do mats.
Right, but there are different formats for the baskets, like you'll have bigger baskets and small.
And smaller baskets. With the Creeks, our baskets were, we used them like we did pots and pans, and they were used, there's a set that's 4 baskets, a corn processing set. And they were usually at least maybe 15 to 17 inches both ways, so they were a bigger basket, but shallow.
What's been one of the most important awards that you've won?
Best of Show.
And that was where?
For 2 years. I think it was in 2014 and 2012, Best of Show at Five Tribes Museum. Best of Class at the Hard Rock. several first place awards. Cherokee, North Carolina.
That must have felt good.
Yes.
How important are commissions in your work?
Of course, I love commissions. I love commissions. And I do them every once in a while.
So really booth shows are predominantly how you earn your living.
That, yeah. Entering
Plus teaching.
into shows and teaching.
Right.
I love teaching.
How many booth shows do you do a year, and what are some of the most important ones that you do?
I don't really do that many as far as sales shows. I don't do that many. I just do like the art shows and then teaching and traveling.
Mm-hmm. Do you use Mvskoke language at all in your basket making classes?
No, other than when I introduce myself. And I introduce myself as Son of Mahaya, which is basket teacher.
You know, they were such, as you say, a functional, vital thing, everyday thing. And now I'm wondering how, since they're most people aren't using them for the purposes they were used for originally, why they're so attractive to people.
As far as like a river cane basket,
Right.
I just think they're getting harder and harder to find. There's fewer and fewer people making them. There's different tribes, just like the Choctaws in Mississippi. They have more access to cane than we do here in Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever I am pricing my baskets, our baskets are priced a little bit higher than theirs.
Mm-hmm. So they're attracted to the materials, partly.
It is. It's just the river cane has a total different look about it, and I just love the look of river cane.
Can you describe it a little bit?
Well, whenever
As
I go out-
contrasted with commercial materials.
with commercial materials, well, river cane just has a, it's just a different look. Commercial materials have no nodes. When your river cane breaks down, you have nodes, and they'll be anywhere from, say, 10 inches to as much as 24, although we have none of the 24 here. But on a commercial basket, there will be no nodes. But on a river cane basket, and that's what I tell people, if somebody tells you it's river cane, you look for the nodes, unless it's just a small little basket. And if it's a small basket, well, then it may not have any nodes in it.
I especially love your mats, and I just couldn't believe, I think that's what you won one grand award on at least. Maybe it was both. And I'm wondering how you got into making mats.
How I got into making mats. It was really several years ago when I was spending some time with Shauna Kane. And I had been to Moundville Archaeological Park, and they had flown me out and asked me to make a floor-length turkey and goose feathered cloak for the chief in the exhibit. So I was visiting with Shauna, and we were discussing, because she was interested in making a cloak. And at that point, it was like I was going to enter into the armory show, and so she said, Shauna said, well, just make a mat. And I'm like, okay. And so that's the very first one that I made, a 3-foot by 5-foot one.
Wow. And basically you hadn't made a mat before. You were
just
kind of
small,
learning.
just little small mats that I would put in frames,
Okay.
but not anything that big.
That ambitious. Going back to Moundville, what was your first trip there like?
My first trip to Moundville, it's been so long. I've been going for probably about 10 years. And I'm sure I probably went as a basket demonstrator. But I love Moundville. I have spent so much time at Moundville. I spend months at Moundville.
When you go, do you stay for a period or?
Yeah, I'll stay. When I went and I did the cloak, I was there for 3.5 months. And at that time that I was there, I ran out of feathers. We had, I think it was 30 Alabama turkeys that we had the feathers from, but I used them all up. Every feather was sewed on individually. So while I was there at that time, the city of Columbus, Georgia, was wanting to repatriate a Creek man, and it was the bones, and it was the full body. So they traced me down at Moundville and asked me would I make a burial basket. And so I did. That basket measures, it's probably maybe this big by this big and with a lid.
Well, that was a real honor.
Oh, I thought I was very honored to have done that.
And they asked you to make this feather cape, and as I understand it, nobody had made one before. Nobody had made one.
No, not at that time. I mean, there was one down at the in Cherokee, North Carolina, in their museum. Now, I don't know how long it had been there, but it had been there for like several years. But at that time, I was the only one that was working on capes.
And how did you go about figuring out that process?
It was all new to me. When they called me, and I'm like, well, I've not ever done anything like that before. And Betsy Irwin said, you can do it. So I came out, and we had Walter Gowan, and he's from Alexander City, Alabama, and he had made a netting, a twined netting, and then I took and drew out the design and just started sewing on feathers.
So you had the netting background already?
Had the netting background. Mm-hmm.
Right. Wow. And you also, one of your pieces was purchased by the Red River Museum. Do you want to tell us about your first visit down there and how you got that contact?
Let's see, how did I get that contact? Let me think. It's like, how did I get that contact? I'm sure they contacted me. They contacted me about doing a basket class for them. And at that time, I was telling them about my mat. And so Jeanette Bohannon, she said, well, bring it down. Let us take a look at it. And so I took it down when I was doing the basket class and hung it up, And before I left, she said, we love it. She said, we are going to find a way to get it. And so they purchased it, and they had it back in collections probably maybe a year. And then in December, they contacted me, or she contacted me, and she said, it's too pretty to leave in collections. We've brought it out. It's on permanent exhibit, and it's going to be on permanent exhibit for several years.
And what did it measure again? It was
3 foot by 5 foot.
3 by 5, yeah. I understand that last year at Moundville, you were not only demonstrating basket making, but you were doing twined bags. Can you explain what twined bags are? And
twine bags are, you just make them on a little loom, just a little, I call it almost like a little H loom, and I use jute or hemp, and it's just the same process of, it's like weaving, but it's just giving a little twist,
Mm-hmm.
So I always say you can twine and think about something else.
yeah, they have a real neat look to them. Do you do any weaving still?
Weaving of
Textiles?
Yes. I just got through having a twine bag class at Moundville and one at Red River in February.
And you don't do any loom weaving anymore, other than the twine bags?
Other than the twine bags.
Okay. You've made one bandolier bag. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yes, it was a forever project. I started it, Martha Berry. Martha Berry came over to the Council House Museum several years ago, and so she was putting on a class. And I hadn't really done hardly any beadwork at that time. So I started this bandolier bag. And
in her class?
In her class.
In
her class. And whenever I first started working on it, I was so gung-ho on it. I finished the pouch, put the tassels on it, Then I started up the sash. And I got halfway through with the sash and my gung-ho was gone. And then I would put it up and then I would weave on baskets or do some other project, and then I'd get it out and then I'd do a flower, one flower, and then wait a couple of months. So finally I said, I've got to get it finished. I've got to get it finished. So I finished it, took it to Cherokee, North Carolina, and it won first place in traditional beadwork.
That's fantastic. So you've been giving a lot of basketry workshops and currently giving one in Eufaula. Why do you think they're so popular?
The workshops, I just think women like basket. Well, not only women, because I have 2 men in my class, but I just think there's something about weaving. I think you put part of yourself into it and people just seem like they enjoy it.
What's your favorite kind of group to teach? It might be in terms of age or demographics.
Really, my favorite is probably from like 10 to 12 years of age. They are so excited once they have finished a basket. And it's just fun working with them.
Do you have any funny stories you can share about teaching?
Well, I have this one friend in Alabama, and this makes me sound kind of bad, but I was teaching her, and so I wanted her to get basketry and to really get it, because I just wanted her to get it because I could tell she had it in her. So every time she would make a mistake, I would make her take it out, and so she would even say in the end, she'd be like, I can't take it out, and I'd be like, give it to me, and I'd just rip it right out. And so she said, well, I really thought at times you were being mean to me, you know. And it was like, no. I said, but look how good of a basket weaver you are now. And she said, now I see why, you know.
That's neat. What's the hardest or most challenging basket you ever made?
I would say when I'm working with river cane, because it's labor intensive. I don't know, should I show my hand or not? It's really hard on your hands. Different weavers and strippers hold it different ways. Well, I must put my pressure in here, and this is my ligament, and my little finger wants to go. But this is on both hands, and it doesn't hurt. I don't feel like it's from weaving. I just feel like it's from stripping and peeling the river cane.
Mm-hmm. When do you gather it, and you know, without telling us where your sources are exactly, where
it can be gathered anytime. The best time to gather it, though, really is after it's gotten cold. I like it then because you don't have to worry about snakes.
Right.
And it just seems like the coolness of the air, the cane is greener. It has
so around November or something?
Yeah, November, December.
And in terms of access, you mentioned it's kind of getting harder to find.
It is very hard to find. I think it needs to be on, if it's not already, on the endangered species list here, at least in Oklahoma.
Is it because it's a wetlands kind of plant that?
That, and there's just so many reasons why. I mean, pesticides where it won't grow in certain areas. Mm-hmm. It needs a flowing water source, not a creek, not a pond, but a creek, something. It can be an underground stream, but it has to have that flowing water. It has to have that movement.
Mm-hmm. What are you working on right now that you're especially excited about?
Well, I haven't started it yet, but I'm in the process of making another big mat. And so it'll be drawing out my patterns and getting it ready to weave with. But I'm just really anxious to get another one started.
What's one of your favorite trip stories, maybe? A place that you especially enjoyed going to?
Well, that was in October, and the Creek Nation took us to the Smithsonian. to the Native American Museum. We were there for a week. At that time I had another big mat I had made, and I had a collector from Belgium bought it and took it back with him.
Oh, that is wonderful. And did you get the opportunity to kind of look at some other mats out there as well?
No, no. There was not really, I shouldn't say that. There was not really that much artwork to really be seen.
That was on display.
That was on display. Mm.
Yeah. That's what I understand too. When you're preparing for a show, do you typically work on several baskets at a time, or baskets and mats simultaneously, or do you like to start one thing and kind of work all the way through?
To start one thing and then finish it. Unless I have like a big order. I just got an order from a museum in Alabama telling me that they want 50 small baskets. So whenever I have somebody that orders them like that, I'll do it like assembly line.
Right.
The Creek Nation ordered 100 little small baskets from me a couple of years ago.
Oh wow, for the gift shops?
It was to give out, it was for the tourism department.
How neat. And the same with Alabama, are they going to be giving them to?
No, these will be going through their gift shop.
Through the gift shop. Is there anybody special who's received one of your baskets that you know about? Well, they're all special, I'm sure, but if it's...
I can't think of anybody right offhand.
Right. I'm sure they really enjoy them. Have you made any new discoveries about the colors or the dyes that you're using with your baskets in the last few years?
Well, I don't really work a lot with dyes because as Creeks, we didn't really use dyes. I mean, we would maybe in something ceremonial, but basically we stayed away from dyes because our pots were, our baskets were for utilitarian purposes.
Right. Can you talk a little bit about, sometimes you do have to use commercial reed as I understand it. Can you talk a little bit about that and explain, it's kind of interesting when you do have to use the commercial materials, how they have a sort of double use.
What I use as a commercial is binder cane. It comes from China. It's the outer core of rattan, which that makes the shiny part look like river cane. The inner core is what we call round reed, and it would be used for the honeysuckle baskets, so I more or less just call it fake honeysuckle.
Right. But you also gather honeysuckle.
Yes, I do gather honeysuckle. I use yucca. I've woven with palmetto. Buckbrush. I'll weave with just about anything that I can kind of try.
What's a material that you really didn't expect to like as much as you did, and a weaving material?
As far as basketry goes,
yeah,
buckbrush.
And what distinguishes buckbrush?
It's just the gathering and the harvesting of it, because it's the roots and it has to be dug up.
Oh, so you dig it up by the roots. It would be fun to see some examples. I don't know if we'll get to. How do you sign your baskets or mats, or how do you let us know that they're yours?
I don't. Whenever I first started out, I would take a little piece of dyed river cane, I would stick down in it, and then I just kept forgetting to do it. But I just almost think by now people just get, you just get a certain look to your weaving, and you can just tell by looking at it, or at least I can, as to who made that basket.
And is it sort of like other textiles where sort of the evenness of the weave, or what makes for a good weaving?
I'd say a tight weave.
A tight
I
weave.
said I would rather have a ugly little basket that was tight and sturdy than one that would be loose and full of color.
And can some of your baskets actually kind of hold water, or
No, our baskets were not really made to hold water.
but they can hold meal, or they could actually,
They could hold meal.
Right.
Mhm.
Do you continue to do research about baskets and mats at this point, or
I'm always trying to do research. Like I said, I was fascinated with the natural rimming methods because so many basket weavers still use, I call it like a commercial rimming method. But the natural ones are where you take the reeds and you weave them back into each other. And the Cherokees have a double rimming method. I had worked with Shauna Kane on, we had worked at one time together, but we really couldn't figure it out. We tried, and then I just got off on my own and was able to come up with the Cherokee double rim.
yeah, and they're just a distinctive look. We definitely get to see that. They're just beautiful. What is your creative process from the time you get an idea?
It just drives me crazy. I get so bad, sometimes I can't even sleep at night. I said I will be weaving in my head or thinking up designs, get up during the middle of the night, and then start drafting them out.
So you'll think of the design, you'll sketch them out in a little notebook that you keep, or?
On a graph paper.
Uh-huh. Have you tried to ever incorporate some of the more Mississippian, older motifs at all?
Yes, I've been doing, I just did a mat that I entered into the Five Tribes show, and it was a Chittimacha pattern. The Chittimacha tribe, they made beautiful, beautiful baskets. Their designs were so elaborate. So right now I'm just kind of really researching on the Chittimacha.
What is your creative kind of routine? Do you like to work during the day or at night, or do you have?
I just work during the day and during the night. I live alone, so it doesn't matter if I sleep. Sometimes I'll stay up till 6 in the morning weaving, and then go to bed at 6 in the morning, maybe get up and sleep a couple hours and get up and start weaving again.
And when you're going after your materials, are you pretty much within traveling distance of your home when you're looking for materials, or do you sometimes go farther?
To get my river cane, I have to go about an hour and a half. That's my closest from either way. There is river cane around Tahlequah, up and down the Illinois River, and I do have permission to gather there. But I try not to go there, since basically that's the Cherokee territory. But I have gathered a lot. Shauna and Roger Kane and I have spent a lot of time together, going out gathering cane, and just me spending weeks with them. And I was just stripping and peeling cane.
Wow, actually staying down there while you're working?
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. How long does the stripping process take once you've...
Whenever I go and get cane, you can get 4 long stalks out of each stalk. So whenever I go, I try not to get any more than about 30 stalks, which will take me 3 days of constant working, and that's just to get it what we call the first peel, and that's peeling the first layer off. Once you get that first layer off, then you can set it back and keep it, and then whenever you have more time, get it out and then keep thinning it down. But that first layer is probably sometimes at least 1/4 of an inch, so if you do not get it off, then it's going to turn back woody on you and you won't be able to use it.
Mm. And there's also a soaking process, I guess. Is that for the honeysuckle?
Well, say that I got, and I'm known as, Ted would always call me a cane hog, because when we went to the cane break, I would say, just one more, just one more. But whenever I would get so greedy like that, then I would bring it home and I would wrap it in a tarp and pull towels and pour water over it and keep it moist until I could get it worked up.
Right, right. I was wondering who else have you gathered with? Because it seems like it would be good to be going with a couple of people.
Sandy Fife Wilson. I think that was last summer. Sandy and I went out and we came to the house and stripped and peeled cane. At one time with the Mvskoke Creek Nation, we did take about 15 or 20 of us out. And not that many stuck with it, of course. I've taken the...
were they adults or were they...
Adults. It was all adults. It was when Mike Berryhill went with us. And then I have taken the Creek Language Department several times and took them to the cane break. We gathered cane, brought them back, and worked at stripping and peeling it.
Have you ever taken younger children?
No, not really. Not really.
That might be an experience that they would get a lot out of too. So what's been kind of a fork in the road moment for you where it's interesting that you started sort of in midlife, you start this new journey, but looking back so far, and hopefully you've got lots more baskets to make and things, what's been a fork in the road moment where you could have gone one direction and you went in this?
I guess my fork in the road was when Ted came to me and asked me to be the basket teacher. Because before then I loved pottery. I loved it. And when I very first started doing baskets, it was just like kind of okay. It was okay. And then I just got hooked on it.
And you never wanted to go back to pottery?
Well, I do pottery off and on, off and on. I still teach pottery classes.
Okay, I didn't realize that.
But basketry is just a little bit above pottery.
When you're doing your pottery classes, are you hand digging your clay too, or are you working with commercial clay?
We're usually working with commercial clay.
What's been one of the high points of your career so far?
Well, I would have to say, even though it's not to do with basketry, was when I made the cloak for Moundville. It is absolutely beautiful. They're hoping that it will last at least 20 years, if not longer. And I say that is my crowning glory.
Right, and even still now there are just a couple people who even know how to make those caves, and that was such an accomplishment. What's been one of the low points of your career so far?
I don't know that I have had a low point.
But I think you mentioned that you had your dad up until fairly recently. Did they get to see your folks see your basketry? Did they get to?
Well, my mother passed away when she was 53, so I hadn't even been doing anything in the artwork at all while she was alive. And then my dad got to experience it with me. He would go with me to some of my shows, and he would tell me he was so proud of me. And then he would tell me that my grandmother, my Creek grandmother, that she was looking down and that she was so happy for me.
That's neat. Well, is there anything that we forgot to cover or that you'd like to talk about before we start looking at your work?
Not that I know of.
Okay, we'll pause a minute and take a look at your artwork. All right, tell us about this.
This is a river cane dart quiver. This is natural. Should I have moved it?
Sure.
Natural walnut dye.
Beautiful.
This is oak around the top. I did have a arrow quiver that went with it. It was like 27 inches long. It had a very intricate design on it. I had it in Alabama. A lady fell in love with it and wanted it for her son, and I really told her I didn't really want to sell it, but she just kept on, and so finally I said, okay, go ahead.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that is really neat. Really neat. Is it a little bit harder to make the longer shapes too and do?
It is. I do what we call twining, and twining is where I would take a piece of wax thread or sinew and twine around each stake, and that keeps the bottom of it square. And as I go up, I would twine about every 6 or 8 rows to keep it going up straight.
Okay, yeah. Oh, it's really.
And who's to know whether our ancestors did twining, because twining was cut out, so there's no way to know, but I assume that they did.
Right, because you couldn't keep the structure otherwise. That is really neat. You know, just kind of thinking about how light brown that on the dart carrier that the walnut came out. I would have expected it to be really dark.
But with the river cane is not as porous, and so when you are using a natural dye, it can have to stay in the dye bath for as much as a month and a half even, just to absorb the color into it.
Wow. Okay, would you like to tell us about this?
This is a river cane. This is a creek basket. This is the shape of our baskets. The distinguishing features of a creek basket is they were shallow. They had square bottoms, kind of rounded tops, no lids, usually a double rated rim around them. And if you'll notice, the shiny side on this basket is woven to the inside, where on the outside is the rough. Normally on a lot of baskets, the shiny side is put to the outside. Well, I believe that it was done this way because we use them as corn processing, and that way the corn would slide across the basket easier.
That totally makes sense. This is just beautiful. So these are part of your big order, right, for the
Yes,
museum?
for a museum that they want 50 of these little small baskets. These are made of binder cane. It's a 4mm cane, which is a smaller cane. I use commercial dyes, which I always say come from the Walmart root. And then I put a little braid. If you'll notice, there's a little braid around the top of these baskets. That's something I kind of do as my signature when I'm not doing a double natural braid. And that way I know when I see a basket that has this little braid around it, more than likely that's someone that I taught.
Oh, that's neat. I hadn't thought about the fact that your students would in a way be, yes, sort of following in your footsteps in terms of style and remark and things. Okay, this is your bandolier bag.
Yes, this is the bandolier bag that I started under the instruction of Martha Berry. It really took me 5 years to finish it. I hate to admit it, but it did. This is something that most people do not bead under the flap, so I even did beadwork under the flap. This design is creek. As creeks, we used a lot of floral. But this design was inspired by Merv Jacob from Tahlequah. The red on here is silk. They're all glass beads. This one, first place in traditional beadwork in Cherokee, North Carolina.
It is beautiful. Come in for a closer look here. Okay, so we're looking at one of your mats, your larger mats, and it's just got some gorgeous natural colors in it. You want to tell us about this?
This I called a creek sleeping mat. I entered it into the Armory show. That's the only show it's been in. It won 3rd place.
Oh my goodness.
But that was okay.
Well, it's a gorgeous piece of work. And how long did it take you to do this?
When I'm working on a mat this size, I quit counting after 400 hours.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah, it's really beautiful. Okay, so we're looking at actually some of your early clay work. You want to tell us about these figures?
These are the ones that I started making, which I called them storytellers and figurative pottery. I started doing these in the 90s. This first one is John Timothy came to me from Mvskoke, and he had a picture of him with his outfit on, and he said, "Can you make me in clay?" And I thought, "Let me try." So that's my of John in his outfit, and I made one for me and one for him, and he gave his to his mother.
Oh, that is great.
I just talked to him probably about 2 weeks ago, and he brought it out and showed it to Mary Beth, and she said it was the cutest thing she'd ever seen.
Really, these are just wonderful. You may have to pick these up again. How about the second figurine?
The second one, I call this one an 1830s Creek man.
Yeah.
And a lot
Nice
of them,
detail.
I was putting babies on them. But on this one, I just didn't put any on. And then this was just like a little medicine man.
Right, right. They are great. And I understand you get to move back out to your workshop.
Yes, I have a, I guess you'd call it a double garage. And so that's where, when the weather's nice and warm, I love to spend all my time out there weaving. When I'm making a mat, I just put down a plastic tarp, and then I climb on top of it and start weaving.
And there wasn't enough light, so we filmed indoors. You take your own photographs
Yes, I do. I do.
of your artwork. That's great. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Mary.
Thank you.